think that's it. So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this, goodness me, whatever it is, 8th session of our 9 sessions on practice bodhicitta, with this focus, excuse me, on the 6 paramita. So let's start today with a wonderful motivation. Let's start it with a huge heart, a heart that reaches out from deep in here to each and every sentient beings, very especially to our own parents and our siblings and our children, and all of those who figured as real beings in our lives. And with that big heart, we try and love each and every one of them, and in particular, those who've been unkind to us, with as much love as we can possibly remember, as we can possibly generate, as we can possibly feel. And we feel joyful beyond belief that we have Dharma. Dharma is the only thing that goes with us beside our karma after death. It's the only thing that's forever. Everyone else, everything else is impermanent. But Dharma is our best friend until we reach enlightenment itself. Oh, that's a long way. I mean, I hope it's as quick as possible. But it may take a little while. And over however many lifetimes that little while lasts, Dharma will come back and be your friend. And all the rest just comes and goes like the morning dew. So let's do our prayers. Sanje chodon soji chonamla jancho bado dane chapsanje dagi jinso jipe sonamje rola penchera sanje dropara sho semchen tamche dewa dang dewe jodang dem para joche dongal dang dongal je jodang shawara joche dongal semchen tamche dewa dang dewe jodang dem para joche dongal dang dongal je jodang shawara joche dongal me pen dewa dang pa dang men shawara joche Niren chadan ne tan shalwe tan yom chempola ne paranchoreche. Deyanta shamme shamawati shameta shatro mam kure marazite karota ke orita jovati ola yane beshudan male malapan ye kukure Kaka grase grasana muki para mukia muki shametane sawa graha bandanane negri hita sawa pava prawadina vimukta marapasha satapita buddha mudra nugatita sawa mare budsarita parishuddhi bigat samtu sawa mara kama. Alen sawe lama rinpoche dagi chiwara bende denshola karin chempo gone jisonte kuson tuje madrup saldo sol. So please take out your brain and polish it. We're going to be busy this morning. You'll need all your wits about you, and I'm sure you do, for the benefit of all beings, of course, and for the benefit of your own understanding. So as usual with these talks, it doesn't quite fit into the program. I do need to say a few more words about the paramita of Dhyana that we were with last week, I think it was. And I'll try and do that as quickly as possible. But I want to make a point about Dhyana. And I also need to make a similar point when we come to it about prajna, about wisdom. The smaller picture, what the name itself means, and the bigger picture. So with Dhyana, we have this word which means absorption. Usually it's translated as one-pointed meditation, but the whole point of one-pointed meditation is absorption. And we did a lot about Dhyana last week. We saw why we need it, because when your mind doesn't have the power to be where you want it, one-pointedly in virtue, the definition you learned, then we live within the fangs, the jaws of the defilements. They can get us anytime. They can destroy a year, 10 years, a lifetime, 10 lifetimes of work through anger, through lust, through whatever it is. So we need the power of holding our mind where we want it, in what is good, what is virtuous, so that we can work against lifetimes of habits of the mind's poisons that come and get us, and we don't know when. And they come and get us when our mind is triggered by what comes to us from the outside. What comes to us from the outside comes through the power of past karma. Past karma can troll up people from 50 lives ago. You know, your ex from 50 lives ago, ta-da, back on the scene. And we just don't know what that can trigger in us. Maybe something that's not been triggered at all in this life, or in the last life, or the life before. So we need this power of holding our mind so that it's the power of the defilements to get us becomes weaker and weaker, because they're knocking at the door and they can't get in. So that power of habit is reduced by a new habit, which is keeping your mind where you want it with various foci. But what I need to explain is, whereas dhyana and becoming absorbed is absolutely central in the Southern Buddhist traditions, the Shravaka traditions. It's the way to liberation. It's the way to becoming an arhat. It is needed but used with caution in the Mahayana traditions. The reason is because of the power of absorption. Power of absorption. So we need to go. I kind of brushed it off last week, and I sent you off to the teachings on karma and said you'll find the details there, but I have to say something. Okay, so what happens? This is quick, okay? We're going to go very quickly through something. What do they do in those Southern traditions? You make an external focus. Of course, they've got things like objects, stones, flames, anything, but you make specific focus based on the elements. So the first one is the earth element. You actually make something from clay or whatever it is that is square and yellow colored, and that you look at. And that you look at saying in your mind or with your mouth, usually in the end in your mind, earth, 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 earth. And you keep your mind on the visuals. And bit by bit, there happens what's called a mental reproduction inside you, where, you know, it's like when you look at anything for long enough, then even if you look away, it's kind of still there inside you, and you've been saying earth, 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 is that the mind finds peace because it's not distracted. All the time it's bringing itself back to what you're looking at and your reminder word, earth, 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 earth. So that gradually it's not quite like a trance, but in what's called the mental counterpart inside you of the earth kasina, is called a kasina, then the mind gets absorbed. And once that absorption is there, it can last a long time. One learns to make it last a long time. It's an absorption. So you're not there, how can you say, with a watch and with control being absorbed, you're absorbed. So the programming happens before you go in. You know, it's like when you go to sleep at night and you say, I'm going to wake up at 5 o'clock. And somehow You wake up at 5 o'clock. So you program how long you're going to be absorbed, and then when it's finished, it ends. When there is the first level of total absorption, there are 4 qualities which are present. The first is thought, intentional thought, where in that case of the earth kasina or the wind kasina or the fire kasina, you are thinking earth, earth, earth to keep you focused. That thought is present one way or another. A second thing is analysis of this image of the earth element. Thought, analysis. And then there is physical bliss, which described in the Theravada text is just amazing. They say, it's like, woo! And it says it feels like you're rocketed up into space. Your whole body is suffused with bliss because of the absorption. And there is mental well-being, joy, bliss, whatever you want to call it. The mind is really, really good. With time, this is realized to be not as peaceful as it could be, because there's a lot going on. You've got thought, you've got analysis, and you've got physical bliss and mental bliss. And so then one works on absorption, but without the thought, without the intentional thought, and without the mental analysis. So there is just absorbed physical bliss, mental bliss. Then that's called the second level of dhyana. And then it's realized that although mental joy, bliss, well-being is pretty cool, it's not as peaceful as the mind could be. And there's a realization that even more subtle, even more profound is the mind which is still. And the body remains blissful. That is the third level of absorption, much, much deeper, producing many more qualities. And then, of course, as you can imagine, number 4 has to go, the physical well-being, so that one's in a state of total equanimity. This is followed by training in 4 formless meditations: limitless space, limitless consciousness, nothing at all, that's the name of the meditation, and neither cognition nor absence of cognition. So we get 4 levels of dhyana and 4 formless meditations. One learns to master those. And especially the 4th dhyana, staying in there is one of the main ways of clearing up karma and attaining the state of arhat. And then one does what is called jumping, hopping and jumping it's called, whereby you have to be able to go into 1st dhyana, then immediately, 4th dhyana, then immediately, 2nd formless meditation, so that your mind is pliable. It doesn't take time. Your mind is mastered. So anyway, there's a whole story like that. And because of keeping the mind absorbed and keeping it totally one-pointed, the whole power of your history goes, and where you end up is absorbed, totally absorbed, the mind absorbed within itself, which you'll remember was the definition of dhyana. The mind turned within, remaining where you wanted, one-pointedly in virtue. So in the Mahayana, we need to keep the mind where we want it, to erode the power of our past and our history to a very, very fine level. But we don't want to become absorbed for too long, because it wastes time for us. We're on a different journey than those in the Southern Buddhist traditions. We need every moment we can get to develop compassion. And while your mind is absorbed, it's gone. There's no compassion in there. There's no sensorial input. There's no thinking, awareness of others. It is just gone into a state of peace, inner, personal peace. So, not here. I don't have time today. I have to rush. But There is so much to think about here, and especially for you, no matter what stage of meditation you are, one thing to take away from this: a good meditation isn't when you feel good. You know, if you're starting to get physical bliss, a mental bliss, and you think my meditation's working, well, it's only working in a samsaric way because you like bliss, right? You like feeling good. That's the root of all samsara, is why we run after all the samsaric things. So it's no different, basically, inside attachment to good feelings. The only definition of a good meditation, whether you go through a half an hour of nightmare or not, is, did you apply the instructions as best you could? Doesn't matter what experience you have. This is such classic fundamental teaching on meditation, but still people say, I hear them, they say, oh, I had a great session. Why? Because I felt good. You know, they felt peaceful. Okay, it's nice. But did you feel more compassion? Did you understand your mind better? These are the real questions. Are you a bit more of a bodhisattva because of that meditation session? Akon Rinpoche, I told you last week, used to say, you know, if you want that sort of experience, go to a sauna, go to a beach, get a massage. So much easier than sitting, struggling with your mind. So anyway, what I want to tell you is that that talk was called Dhyana meditation because it is about dhyana and the power of one pointed absorption. So now if we expand from that specific dhyana to what's called meditation in general. So the Tibetan for dhyana is samten. And absorption is tingyitzin, samadhi. But the word for meditation, probably as you understand, and I understand meditation, is all the different ways we can use our mind. Using Vajrayana meditations, doing Tonglen, whatever it is. There's another word in Tibetan, beautiful sound, gom. Don't turn on your microphone, but please say it with me. I love this word, gom. Gom. And gom is more generally everything that meditation is about. Gom means habituation. We develop new habits. We use, because the old habits have a grip, we need to gom, we need to train in new habits by doing them again and again. Tonglen, again and again, or focus meditation again and again, Chenrezig practice again and again, to gradually instill new habits in our relative mind that purify the old habits and take us towards enlightenment. So that's why I'm not calling this fifth paramita meditation paramita. I'm calling it what it was in the classical teachings, Dhyana Paramita, because it is more specifically. Now, in that chapter, as I mentioned, Khenpoken says there are also, very briefly, he says there are all the Bodhisattva meditations, and there are also the Vajrayana meditations. But he feels a need to show us the place of learning to hold our mind where we want it in goodness. So now that's all, as much as I can say, given the time to round off those teachings. Please refer to the module because the sort of need to know data in more detail is in there. And I really would love you to read it, think about it, keep coming back to it, contemplate it, reflect on it. And so we've come to a point now, a very, very important point. One way or another, we've been through the first 5 paramita. Generosity, right conduct, forbearance, diligence, and then dhyana. Now, or more generally, meditation. Now, those 5 together form a group. That group is called, in Mahayana Buddhism, compassion. So when we want to cultivate compassion, at first we think of compassion as a sort of a kind sentiment towards other beings, which is where it starts. And then a longing, as we saw in aspiration bodhicitta, to bring them all to enlightenment by becoming enlightened ourselves. But the reality of compassion in practice, because this is practice bodhicitta, you're only really compassionate when you are generous and when you are ethically pure in your conduct, keeping your commitments and so on. And when you can forbear, when you can cope with anything without getting upset, without your mind being troubled. Your mind is calm. Your mind is loving and caring, no matter what happens, forbearance. And then your joy of Dharma enables the Buddha's blessings to come through you and into your practice. And then there is not just the compassion of your mind formulating ideas, you start to feel the compassion of all the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas beyond any words. And then meditation. So these are called compassion in the Bodhisattva teachings. That same set in Vajrayana teachings is called skillful means. Skillful means. So you'll find again and again, either in the symbology in Tibetan Buddhism or in the texts, it talks about the union of 2 things. It's either compassion and wisdom, or skillful means and wisdom. That's the words different, but the meaning's the same. It's the union, the fusion of the first 5 paramita, which are about working on a relative level with our karma, with our experience, the first 5, where we develop compassion, and wisdom paramita, which we come to today. So even though it's just one paramita, it's said to be the other group, because within wisdom we have many subdivisions. Compassion, wisdom. Skillful means, wisdom. The first 5 paramita as a group, and then wisdom. And now we touched on this at the very beginning of these paramita teachings by saying that actually generosity is just either just generosity or it's just the virtue of generosity, but it's only the paramita of generosity when there is, you remember, I hope you do, greatness and purity. Greatness through 3 things, greatness through the presence of jhana, primordial wisdom, greatness through the presence of prajna paramita, and all the aspects of prajna, and then great through dedication. And it's pure because of the fusion of voidness and compassion, and the voidness has the 4 stamps of voidness. So that applied all the way through. Another thing that applied all the way through these first 5 paramita is they're only paramita in practice as long as our aspiration bodhicitta is there in the moment, underpinning, supporting the actual practice. When you lose, when it's not there, bodhicitta, mind, aspiration, motivation, then the practice is not paramita. So in that, what makes each of those things like forbearance the paramita, we saw that wisdom voidness is very important. So today we come to the 6th transcendent perfection, the 6th paramita, which is that of prajna. According to which part of India and so on, there are all sorts of pronunciations, prajna, pranja, Prajna. So let's say prajna. So prajna, the gana bit comes in quite a few words, as in jhana. There's a sort of a ja sound, gana sound, ja sound, which means knowing. Knowing in the sense of knowing, directly aware of something. So when we say jhana, primordial awareness. When we say praja, it means best awareness. When we say samja, which is cognition, it means awareness where various elements like your eye and something visible come together. We have several words, all based around the ja word. In Sanskrit, and based around the she word in Tibetan, yeshe, sharab, and so on. Now, where to start? First of all, my get out clause, read the module. Read the module. The module itself is just a summary. As I was saying before we started the formal talk, in Samiling for 6 years, I interpreted for Khenpo Labu, Rinpoche, and there was a summer school, 1 month, intense study, every day of the month, several sessions, exams, homework, all that kind of thing. And it took 4 months studying the main texts of Middle Way and Prajna Paramita to even start to get into it. So there's no way in 1.5 lectures I can do anything but sort of point you into what's going on and bring up a few points. There is a more formal structure presentation in the module. That's why I asked you. And then I also sent you, because today and next week we'll go through Gampopa's chapter. Sorry, my printer doesn't work very well, so it's not as clear as yours, but this mind map of Gampopa's chapter, which is very, very helpful. Now, we're looking at Prajna Paramita. With Gampopa's help, we'll be looking at the larger picture of wisdom, the kaju, understanding of wisdom. The reason I'm telling you this is if you come across teachings, wonderful teachings like Tilopa's instruction to Naropa, it's called Ganges Mahamudra text, then he says, Tilopa tells Naropa, what I'm teaching you just now, the followers of Prajna Paramita don't get. Oh. Paramita follow, Prajna Paramita followers will never get it. So we need to understand that just like meditation and dhyana are not the same. There is Prajna Paramita in a narrower sense. There's Prajna Paramita as a school of Buddhism that evolved in India, and then that had repercussions in what happened in Tibet. The history is absolutely fascinating. And I have to hold myself back from going there because it really is. You learn a lot from what happened when you study the history of Dharma in India and in Tibet. We don't have time. But then there is Prajna as what it really is, what the word means, very, very best wisdom. Not a Buddhist tradition, not a set of doctrines, not even Madhyamaka philosophy in all its various and wonderful schools and traditions. Just what is the best wisdom? Gampopa helps us to explore that. Prajna Paramita. So he starts, you'll see in your structure, we've got 7 main points of structure, and he starts with the benefits of having prajna and the faults of not having prajna. And he talks about these two sets of paramitas. Skillful means compassion, the first 5, and Prajna Paramita. Now, before we go any further, if you think Prajna Paramita, think that means shunyata, voidness, emptiness. And as soon as you think voidness, emptiness, please immediately turn it the other way around and think wisdom. Don't think spaciousness. Don't think of anything you might have read somewhere, somebody's idea or description of shunyata, about something experiential, a state. Shunyata is not a state. It can happen. It's so different from dhyana. With dhyana, you're absorbed in whatever it is, in one of the 4 levels, depending on your initial focus. It's a state with all its qualities. Shunyata can happen anywhere, with anything, in the quietest of mind states, in the busiest of world states. The shunyata, the emptiness, the voidness of what happened, means one thing only. If you have shunyata, it means you're wise. You see through the illusion. You see through the illusion. It doesn't mean the illusion goes away. You know, if you look at a mirage in the desert, you're pretty wised up. You know what's going on. So you don't take your jerry can for a 2-mile walk to go and get some water. But once you know, and you're looking with the eyes of wisdom at the mirage, does the mirage go away? No. When you look at a rainbow, you know it's not up in the sky, even though it looks like it's up in the sky. When you know that, when your physics is good and your brain science is good, all about your optic nerve and your visual cortex and all the rest, when you know what's going on, when you know that rainbow is nowhere to be found, do you stop seeing it in the sky, seemingly in the sky? No. So shunyata, emptiness, voidness, is when in the illusion that's taking place in whatever moment it is, you are not duped by the illusion's apparent reality. You know what's going on. You see through the illusion, and it doesn't mean the illusion's gone away. This is the end result definition of shunyata. On the way there, we have many practices, lots of things happen, lots of remedial practices, where too much to go into, but we're looking at the real meaning of prajna. Wisdom means shunyata. Shunyata means you see through the illusions. So if we have, so Khenpoken says there are, and he's quoting the main Mahayana sources, first 5 paramita, and then the 6th one. He says, if you have the first 5 paramita without wisdom, so you don't have prajna, if you don't have it, then they are like a whole crowd of blind people. Sorry, it's not politically correct, visually challenged, or whatever it is, but let's just take a direct translation. So what it means is a whole crowd. It could even be 10,000, because when we develop generosity and right conduct, we can have many, 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 many relative level qualities. But just like he said, but no matter how many blind people there are, they can't find their way to the city of happiness, the citadel of happiness. And it only takes one-sighted person that they trust to take them to enlightenment. So it's only when we have what we've seen, greatness and purity, when we have prajna, that the practice of generosity and all the first five starts to take our mind out of its timeless trap in samsara and towards a Buddha's enlightenment. Each moment where there is prajna and compassion, then we are breaking out of an age-old prison. So it says it's like a crowd of blind people and without the eyes. They've got the legs, which is the important part of that. And they could walk to the city. They've got the legs, but they don't know where to go. The other way around, if you've got wisdom, but you haven't cultivated the first five paramita, then you're like somebody who's got the eyes, but you don't have the legs. You can see where you want to go, but you can't go there. Now, this is quite relevant because the likes of us, even though we're all so different, if I can dare say something so vulgar as the likes of us, but we are generally what? Western, white, educated people. We went to school, went to university, many of us. We've got very, very sharp minds. If we're in Dharma, despite everything, we've probably got past lives. Capital of being Dharma people. So you've got a past life connection. You've got a bright mind. It's quite possible that you'll understand shunyata words at least, and the ideas of Mahamudra, Dzogchen, and so on intellectually. You'll get it. Wonderful. But then maybe 20 years later, you've still got it, but you've not changed very much. And maybe you're not that closer. Maybe you're even further away because you've got such intellectual arrogance, because you understand, you think you don't really understand, but you think you understand the deep teachings. You kind of nod, yeah, Tiloparami, we're buddies. He said that, I got it. I know just where he's at. We think. Why not? Because we haven't developed the good heart, the kindness. We've not truly given ourselves to others. We're not as ethical. We're not keeping our commitments. We are not forbearing. All those things. So it's like having eyes, but no legs. And how frustrating is that? Because you can see the distant, beautiful mountain and forest you want to go to. And you're stuck in your 20-story flat where you can see the distant mountains, but you're in a concrete tower of ego. So this is why again and again in Vajrayana and in Mahayana, we get this fusion of wisdom and skillful means. Needed, not just in the end, but as we go along, we need to keep readjusting, so that these things are in balance. So we'll never get the Buddha's enlightenment without the prajna, and prajna and skillful means need each other. That's the main point first. So what the one text that Gampopa quotes says this: wisdom without means, and means without wisdom, both are bondage. You're not free. So we need both of them to become free. And then he goes on to this essential character, that's point number 2, of prajna. Our definition, we had for dhyana, the mind one-pointedly in virtue where you want it. So here we've got Prajna is. Now, without turning on your sound, would you kindly repeat after Ken 3 times? Ready? Prajna is an excellent, discerning appreciation of phenomena. Prajna is, I can't see everyone's lips moving. Need the sound off. You don't need the sound on, but I need to see the lips moving. Prajna is an excellent, discerning appreciation of phenomena. Prajna is an excellent, discerning appreciation of phenomena. Okay. So let's look at that briefly. Excellent, it does mean it can get better and better. You're not going to master prajna in the coming week, or maybe in the coming rest of your life, or in the coming lifetimes. It gets better and better. And it ends up in the bodhisattva levels, when you get to 8th, 9th, 10th levels, as the 10 powers of prajna. So helpful for everybody, like the knowing of past lives, the knowings of karma streams, where they end up, how they're formed, and so on. Anyway, excellent. Discerning means discerning. It can distinguish one thing from another. Now, this takes us deep, and it takes us too deep, because we start getting into the different schools of Madhyamaka and how they, middle way theory, and how they understand this. But here it says phenomena, of phenomena at the end. The word that's translated as phenomena is Dharma. Dharma. When we go right back to the ancient Sanskrit etymology of the word Dharma, it means that which holds, that which holds. And it means what holds its own qualities. The classic example is fire is hot and it burns things. If it's not hot, it's not fire. If it doesn't burn things, it's not. That's what fire is. That's innate to what it is, as opposed to water, which is lubricating and fluid and so on. So when we talk about 84,000 dharmas, it doesn't so much mean the Buddha's Dharma teachings. It means the main, it's like on your computer screen. I forget how many is it, 64 million shades of color are possible, something like that. That's how many shades of color there are. When we think about each thing that holds its own quality, like I've got here, it's a gong. It does what a gong does, holds its own qualities. It's a gong. So trees, seashells, things have their own innate nature. So they're called Dharma. And Prajna understands the difference. And not just the difference in what something is, but therefore what it can do and what it can't do. You can bring things together, as in chemistry, or as in making a garment and stitching things and so on. You can bring things together with their qualities to make realities. We can bring our emotions and our thoughts and our body, speech, and mind together to make karma of different sorts. So Dharma is able to discern this one from this one, even though at first they seem the same. It's like, what can you say? At first, when I grew up, maybe all Chinese people look pretty much the same. And you certainly couldn't really tell one face from another. And it would just astound you to learn that in 50 years' time, they're going to have cameras that can know each member of their 2 billion population, one from another. How is that possible? But bit by bit, bit by bit. And then you start to listen to music. It's just all classical music. And then you get more and more. You start to recognize this violinist's interpretation, not that one. We know the difference. Somebody puts on a record and said, that's David Oistrakh. You say, never. That's never. Anyway, whatever it is. So this clarity of mind that understands how things are different, that understands within our mind how all of the mind's activities are different, that understands in the whole world around us the play of karma that's making our father who he is, that's making the next door neighbor who she is, and so on. We understand, we feel, we know, recognize the differences. So it's discerning and it's an appreciation. It means that through that, you've got an understanding whereby you appreciate why your neighbor's your neighbor, why your mind is doing what it's doing. You appreciate how the Bodhisattva path, in all of its beautiful construction, can take you where you want to go. You understand why you need to sit for hours of shamatha, and so on. So that's an excellent, excellent definition. Please remember it. Excellent, discerning appreciation of Dharma, of phenomena. Now, it's got the next section, number 3, 3 different aspects of prajna. And now we're looking at wisdom very broadly. 3 excellent discerning appreciations. First one's called worldly or mundane. Now, of course, everyone knows different things. Birds and animals, they know, they'll go and eat some grains and not another. They can be quite fussy with food when you put it out. And they know some things are good for them. They'll eat even what makes them puke if they know they need it as medicine. So animals, humans, of course they have knowledge. Of course they have wisdom of knowing one thing from another. But in particular, what is called prajna as a kind of noble quality of human understanding is what Taisutapa described in a recent talk. Either the 4, or sometimes we make it 5, fields of learning. So in the great institutes like Nalanda in India, people came not just to study Dharma philosophy, but they came because this earliest university in the world, that people came to from far, far away to study, taught the 5 fields of worldly learning. These are interesting. We have about 2 minutes to make them interesting before we move on. Sorry for that. Really sorry, but anyway. They have a general meaning, which you'll find in nearly all of the lists and translations. And they have a much deeper meaning, which thanks to Taisutapa, he shared with us on several occasions, which is really so deep. But anyway, the first one is called creation. So usually it's translated as arts and crafts. It's the sort of things that humans can learn to make. Creation is understanding how to create things successfully. Number 2 is medicine, usually translated as medicine for healing arts. Number 3, when we've got 4, is linguistics. And number 4 is logic. So there are 4 fields of learning. When we make it 5, then linguistics becomes 2. It becomes the innate nature of language, and then grammar. The main thing about the innate nature is mainly epistemology. It's how words can be accurately attributed to these dharma, these phenomena. So we apply the word fire and water and gong and seashell to the right things. And then grammar is how you articulate all those different words and attributions so we make sense with each other. So they're the 5 worldly prajnas. Now there is a deeper way, the Dharma way of presenting them, and it goes more like this. The first one, creation, is understanding all of creation, and in particular the creation of karma. Karma, cause and effect. So what causes effects? All of them in the material world, in our own mental universe, in our experiential universe of life and other people, and our own body and our own karma. What causes the various results? Creation. What created this world that I experienced, that's Ken's world, that you experienced, that's your world, so different from mine? What's behind it? So understanding creations is the first worldly science. The second one, usually called medicine, is not just about what doctors do. It's when the process of causality is causing suffering. How can one intervene, if one can intervene, to make things better, to either remove the suffering or to lessen it, to prevent future recurrence of such suffering? So medicine, healing, is how to intervene in the causal processes. Number 3 is language. We need to learn those things. We need to communicate. So the power of language, and especially the inner sacred power of syllables and consonants to, as in mantra and so on. It's the power of this throat chakra, the power of speech in itself. And then through grammar, how to use that power to be understood by others so that you can help them without misunderstanding. So we need what's generally called grammar, but there's a much vaster sense of grammar, which is the grammar of human communication. Then number 5, logic, becomes Dharma. What we communicate to others needs to be really true, timeless truth, as much as we can. And so the expression of that at the right time, when we've really assimilated it, when we're ready to teach, because we've been told we're ready to teach, when we have something we can share properly, then Dharma. So those 5 are already pretty deep when you get into them, but they are mainly about what goes on in our relative life, the mundane. The second category of prajna is called, so Buddhist, lesser transcendent. So it's transcendent, but it's lesser transcendent because we've got a superior transcendent that's going to come later. So transcendent means it will get you out of suffering forever. Transcendent in this sense means it would take you out of suffering. And then, so that means, and you can see in part 4, which develops the main character of each of these, it's what arises through study, reflection, and meditation in the Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha traditions. So in other words, in the Shravaka or Hinayana, or these days the Southern traditions, how they understand the Buddha's teachings, what they study, the ideas, the practices, how they reflect, so they go deep, deep and deeper still into the meaning of what they study, and how they meditate, how they bring their deep reflection to life in the way they live, and also specifically the way they practice meditation. And then we have the best transcendent prajna. It takes us out of samsara, it's transcendent, but it doesn't just take us out of suffering, it brings us to all the qualities of a bodhisattva and then a Buddha to help other beings. And that's what is studied and reflected upon and becomes meditation, becomes your practice in the bodhisattva way. How are you doing? I hope you're doing okay. I've got, I think, 3 or 4 different eyes just now. I've got one eye on the clock, one eye on the crib sheet, and one eye on you. And so let's keep going. Now, I need to make a parenthesis here, a footnote. That's very important in the Tibetan approach to all of this, and that you need to know, although it's a minefield, but anyway, it's about history, the development of Dharma, and how Tibetans view the Buddha's teaching. Not necessarily how Zen and Theravada and the others view the Buddha's teaching, but how most Tibetans view it. And they talk of what are called the 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma. In the first turning, the Buddha teaches the way of the Shravakas that we have now as Hinayana or Sravaka Buddhism, that we just touched on briefly, how to take your mind out of the power of karma forever and to the state of the Arhat. So the Buddha taught the way out of suffering first, very clearly. He had very gifted disciples. The history of that's fascinating. Who came to him early on, who they brought. They were already gurus with their own disciples. How after the first year, he went to Rajgir and things evolved amazingly quickly. But he had disciples who practiced these teachings, gifted disciples. And that message of what causes your suffering, karma, what causes karma, your mind poisons, what causes your mind poisons, ego. And where does ego come from? This ignorance. All of that, and then how to get out of it by right conduct and by solitude, renunciation, and dhyana meditation. That message was clear. People became arhats. How to stop the pain, how to get out of the suffering. Once that was clear to those who were ready, then the Buddha taught the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, where the focus is on how to help others become free too. And you can only help them if you have such great wisdom whereby you understand them, that they're not like you. Minds are so different. So the Buddha taught the paramitas, the 6 paramitas. And in particular, the Prajna Paramita, the wisdom, went much further than just the absence of self. Remember, suffering comes from karma. Karma comes from the mind poisons. Mind poisons come from a delusion of self, delusion of self. So the Prajna teachings don't just see through the delusion of self, me, I, but they also see through all the delusions that are projected onto what is other than I, other people, things out there, seemingly out there. Is there an out there? Isn't there an out there? And so on and so on. So in the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, which this chapter is in the Bodhisattva teachings principally about, is about the shunyata of everything, all phenomena. Now there's a third turning of the wheel of Dharma, which is included in Gampopa, but not necessarily in all the Bodhisattva's teachings, which is about Buddha nature. Having got rid of all the delusions of me, first turning. Having got rid of all the habitual projections of other, second turning. Then and only then is the mind clear enough and not immediately jumping into the wrong conclusions through the power of habit. Then the mind can be shown its true nature, Buddha nature, with all of its 64 qualities, with its 10 powers, with its 4 fearlessnesses, and so on. So not all Mahayana Buddhists hold that third turning of the wheel of Dharma, but Tibetans mainly do. How much importance they give it depends whether you're Gelugpa, Kajupa, and so on. It gets complicated. Now, while we're still with the history, Tibetans tended to round things off a little bit, and their history wasn't quite as good as ours. So they gave us some wonderful, how can you say, stuff, wonderful stuff. Unfortunately or fortunately, these days, there's some brilliant research that's been done. So they say, oh, Prajna Paramita teachings, yeah, this guy Nagarjuna, he went to the Naga realms, that's why he's called Naga Arjuna. Arjuna means Lord of the Nagas. And the Prajna Paramita teachings given by the Buddha on Vulture Peak and other places had been kept for safety with the Nagas until the time was right. Nagarjuna put on his rucksack, underwater rucksack, and went to the Nagas under the water, recovered the Prajna Paramita texts and brought them to our world. A lovely story. But actually, the historical research shows that the various versions of perfection of wisdom, Prajna Paramita, in 5,000 stanzas, in 8,000 stanzas, 20,000 stanzas, and it's a lot of stanzas for voidness, 100,000 stanzas. Most of these appeared before Nagarjuna. They appeared in the 1st century of our era, and Nagarjuna is roughly dated from 150 to 250 in our era. But nevertheless, what Nagarjuna did do, and that's brilliant, is he made sense of the Prajna Paramita teachings through his middle way philosophy. So his texts, like root verses of the middle way and so on, so precious because they help us understand what Prajna Paramita is really, really about. But what's really interesting is that those Prajna Paramita teachings, predate the Pali canon and so on. There's one text from Gandhara written in Kharoshthi script, which was one of the local Afghan Pakistani writings of the time, that just 10 years ago they managed to carbon date it very accurately to 75 AD. And that was already a copy of a translation of a Sanskrit version of Prajna Paramita. So anyway, let's leave the history, but I did want to share those things. It's important that we are lucid as much as we can be. Now that, if you're looking at your master diagram about this chapter, then these 3 types, worldly, lesser transcendent, superior transcendent prajnas. The third one was what the bodhisattvas learn, what they reflect on, and what they become accustomed to, gom, what becomes their new way of being, thinking, meditating. So the 4th major section says, well, what do we need to know? It says, what is to be known? Us, you and I, Kajupas, in all of that, because Gampopas are aware of all the different traditions and philosophies in India, in all of that, what do we need to know? And he said, we need to know the last one, what the bodhisattvas study. And then out of all of what the bodhisattvas study and learn and practice, then he gives us these points on the right. How many of them? A, B, C, D, E, F, 6. We need to know what they are. the details too much, and you press on any of those buttons, immediately it's going to start things going in your mind, and there'll be so many questions. Yes, but if there's this, then what about that? And that's the beauty of it, because it's there to stimulate our own understanding so that we have this excellent, discerning appreciation of phenomena. So the first one is a refutation of belief in substantial reality. It's kind of philosopher's terms, a refutation. So we're saying, no. Of belief, this means what you might believe in. You know, what for you really and truly feels to be the truth of the matter. We saw in the forbearance paramita that the deepest forbearance is forbearance of shunyata, when your illusions are popped one by one. So painful and not easy. So what we believe to be real. Believe. Not just in terms of which religion we sign up to or which philosophical school we belong to. What you really believe is real. Now, and then we touched on lots of this in the Voidness for Dummies course at the very sort of beginning of these Zoom talks. And it says this applies to two types of entity. Entity. Entity means something that seemingly is. One is a persona, a personal self. And the other is the entities of the various dharmas, things which have their own quality, including other people. So we come to Dharma with assumptions, with fixed images of ourselves, of our parents, of our siblings, of the world around us, so much of it acquired through an education. So many fixed ideas of not just what is, but how all of that fits together. So two types of entity. Now, what we really need to know, and I can't communicate much of any of this because of the time, but what we really need to know, and we had it in the Voidness for Dummies course, is that when the Buddha says, no self, no ego, no you, no me, it does not mean blank, zero, nothing there at all. That will make Buddha a nihilist. It will make Buddha a blooming idiot. He who didn't exist would have spent 45 years talking to people who didn't exist, presenting ideas that didn't exist for the sake of what that didn't exist. What do you call somebody who talks to people who aren't there? Really? If you met somebody talking to people who aren't there, how would you think about that person? Okay, in ordinary life, they might be people who are there for them. But if Buddha really and really believes that there's nobody there in the first place and never has been, why does he go off and meet 5 ascetics who didn't exist to become his first disciples? Now think about it. It's very important. So we need to go back to understand what the hell is going on. At the time of Buddha, there were already wonderful philosophies in India, the Samkhyas, the naked ascetics. We still see them these days going on pilgrimages. There were the Jains, and they each had their own idea of an ultimate existence. An ultimate is. An ultimate is. It could be a personal thing, whereby, like in Christianity, you have an eternal you, an eternal soul. It could be a divine isness, which is just potential, cosmic potential to produce anything, but that is, and so on. So this idea of a personal self was present in the philosophies, and Buddha was simply stating, there isn't one. There's no lasting self. So what we saw in the voidness for Dhamma's things, this is so important. That word self and exists means it has to exist independently. Doesn't depend on anything to be what it is. Something that doesn't depend on anything to be what it is by definition forever. Because there aren't factors making it what it is that can change. It is. It is. So the idea of a forever God, an eternal soul, an eternal cosmic isness were very present. And Buddha's saying, there isn't. Nobody ever found. But relatively, not ultimately and is, but as far as people's experience is concerned, then of course, there's you and there's me. And Buddha spends his 45 years talking to people who relatively are, explaining why they relatively are the changing beings that they are, with the 3 marks of existence. They are impermanent, they don't have a lasting self, and the self they have is subject to suffering. He explains that there's no fixed you, or as Equanimity used to say, solid you. And the more we make ourselves solid, the more we suffer. The more we take that solidity apart, the less we suffer. The more we understand impermanence and suffering and so on. So Buddha's teaching on no self means there is no independent, lasting self. But there is a dependent, causes and conditions, karma, changing self. So he says to his disciples, Shariputra, in a past life, you were this person. I was this person. This is the story. And now we're here. This is why this is happening to us. Devadatta, my cousin in a past life, was this. I'm like this now. We see in the Agamas, in the earliest Buddhist literature, how many times Buddha identified the past lives of Moggallana, Shariputra, Ananda, his wife, and so on, and the promises they've made in those past lives. So we must be very clear that the teachings on no self doesn't mean, haha, you're nothing at all. If we think that, then as we'll see, maybe next week, Sarah has said you're just damn stupid. If you think the Buddha's teaching on no self means you can just say, it doesn't matter. I don't exist, you don't exist. Then please just get out the room and don't call yourself a Buddhist. Buddha never taught that. And it's the utter lack of compassion, utter lack of love for your fellow beings, respect for yourself, respect for fellow beings. Buddha taught that we exist, and we exist in a way that so much suffering that's real for each person. We can never have enough compassion and understanding, this accurate, discerning appreciation of what our fellow beings are, and some feeling for the huge causal processes behind that life after life. But anyway, there is no fixed, lasting identity. So there are lots of teachings about that, comparing the multiplicity of ourselves to like the multiplicity. These days we'd say a car, or the old days it was a chariot. And so there are 2 main areas of argument used in logic to dismantle belief in a self. One is it's called one and many. We think of ourselves as one, but then we find that that one is an eye, a nose, a thought, a feeling, a history, It's many things, so there's not one us. And when we go to any one of those many things, we find that they aren't one thing, they're many things. It's endless. So there's certainly not one fixed self. If we could find one, we could start building up many. But you never even find one once you start researching. So forget, it just takes away our fixed ideas. And then the other is the idea of arising. If something is, how did it come into being? So anyway, a personal self. And then an entity in things and in other beings. So there are the reasoning of the first turning of the wheel of Dharma about there being no real ego, no lasting self, just a series of ever-changing delusions where we think of ourselves. So freedom is to realize for the Shravakas, the voidness, the prajna, the emptiness of the idea of self, to see through the illusion of self by knowing that we are these 5 aggregates: form, feelings, cognitive processes, samskaras, and consciousnesses. And each of those has many, many parts. And we are this composite of the 5 aggregates that by its very nature attracts suffering. Sorry, it's not a very wise way of describing you and me. But here I am, Ken Holmes. I'm a composite of 5 aggregates, and I just attract suffering. So all the karma that made these, and as long as you're in one of these human suits that comes with a whole baggage of karma, part of it played out already, much more to play out. Suffering. So seeing through the illusion of self will be the key to breaking the pattern, stopping the cycle of suffering, so you can get out of it. All of us need to do that, not just the Shravakas. But in the Bodhisattva way, we go further. So I think we need to stop there for today, so there's a bit of time for discussion. And so let me unpin myself. And there you all are. And if you've got it, let's dedicate first of all. Let's dedicate all that was good in the formal part of the teaching to all our fellow beings. Sonam diye tamche zikpane, tobnenye pedranam pamchene, jega nachi pala trukpaye, sipe sole trowat warisho, jancho semcho rinpoche, majepanam jejochi, jepan nyampa me padam, kongne kongdu, garwala sho.